The next presentation's back in person again, so it'll just take a second to upload the presentation.
And the next presentation is mine. So it's called What to Do Next, an activity scheduling schema for social assistance robots for older adults by me, David Golasch, and Gerhard Weber. And now I don't know, can I?
Yeah, come over here so the camera can see you.
Right. And I keep the microphone?
Yeah, you can present, but if you could stand a little closer just so that the people online can see you.
I should stand a little closer. I guess this one is turned on as well, right?
Yes, that one's on as well, but so they won't have feedback.
Right. Okay.
All right, you're good to start whenever you're ready.
And that one works as well?
Yes, it should.
Yes, should. So when we'll try. So, and
you're good to go.
Okay, so
you need help. There's time.
Yeah. So welcome. Yeah, you already know my name and I've introduced myself, so I will skip this, and I already named the title. Just forgot to mention that I'm from the Dresden University of Technology. And yeah, well, the introduction or the motivation is something that I referred to in the beginning of the session already, because I said our common ground is that there's an aging society.
Just share the screen again.
No. But anyways,
Know why it's not going on the screen. You guys can't see it online, can you? The presentation. Let's see if that. Okay, there. I think it's working now.
Now it's working.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I said in the beginning of the session already that our common ground is that we have an aging society and a stressed caregiving sector. So this motivates to use modern technology to assist older people in the future during daily activities and to increase their self-determination. And one approach there is to use robots, so social assistance robots that work for and in at home with the older people. So one problem with those social assistance robots is that they are mostly only single purpose robots, so they are not really intended to do multiple tasks. That's a problem. The interaction needs and preferences of older adults are pretty diverse, pretty difficult to address. And what I want to address today is that the scheduling of activities of social assistance robots is something that's not very easy to do, because the naive way of thinking of how a robot does its work is that the robot does activity by activity, one step after another. Right, so like this sequential activities example here. So if you think that, okay, your robot would help you find some objects. So you lost your keys, for example, and then the robot might help to find this object, find the keys. If that task is done, you'll get over to another task. Maybe you went shopping and you want assistance that helps you by carrying the bags. And if that's done while you're returning back home and you want the robot to open the door, well, that's not really a problem, because all those activities are sequentialized one after another, and there's no contradiction there, no problem. But what's more of a problem is when you have multiple user commands coming in while the robot is already doing something. So what we could think about is something entertaining that the robot could do. So he could play some music or read out the news or something. So it's still an activity of the robot, what it's doing, right? And when you're afterwards telling him, well, I want to know what time it is, you just ask him, yeah, what time it is, and you expect the robot to tell you at the time. With pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But you do not know after telling the time how to proceed. Yeah, so there's a possibility that you say, okay, that's still an activity. The form activity of playing music is finished, so we'll stop now. Or you could expect the robot to continue playing the music, because that's what feels more natural, because, for example, when referring to an Alexa, it's that case. So you're playing music, and afterwards you're asking for the time or the weather, and if everything works well, it will afterwards continue playing the music. That's at least something you would expect. Yeah, and it goes even further. So when you ask the robot, for example, to find my keys, you could ask, where are my keys? And you're not clearly stated what kind of activity you would expect from the robot. Should the robot just tell you where he thought your keys were, or should he guide you to the place the keys are expected, or should the robot help you find them actually? So that's not pretty clear. And even though after you found the keys, what about the music? Yeah, should that music still continue playing afterwards, or do you expect a behavior that stops the music in that case? Or other scenarios. What if there are not only user triggered commands, so you ask the robot to do anything, but something happens and triggers an activity, a robotic activity. So, for example, if you're going for a walk and this robot should follow you to awaiting further assistance, that's still an activity of the robot. So this following process, and then there might be something coming in. So some externally triggered event. For example, there's an incoming call. Somebody wants to talk to you using that robot. Yeah, we consider that. Or you fall and the robot detected that fall, how to react. Or there's an incoming reminder to take your medication in the right moment. What now? And which of these activities that are incoming should be prioritized and should be fulfilled in the right moment? Yeah, that all diverged from the expectancy of having a sequentialized activity pipeline there. So basically, that's something that needs a solution here. Yeah. So how to categorize different kinds of activities, how to distinguish user triggered activities and externally or system triggered activities, and how to schedule them in the right order. Yeah. It's something that we want to address, or that we addressed, using a user-centered design approach that says, okay, basically we have to ask the target user group for the expectations of how to work with a social assistance robot, and in which circumstances, which situations you really expect some assistance. We then created a flowchart like procedure, so a specific procedure how to schedule incoming tasks in cases where a sequentialized procedure is not possible. And afterwards, we asked participants to whether that kind of scheduling feels natural, feels as expected, or has some issues in here, which they do. So first of all, the requirements analysis that we did was a questionnaire that we had among 19 participants, from which half of them are of that target user group of people aged 65 and above. And the other half is associated to caregiving. So it's from the caregiving sector. And we asked them basically for their expectations of how a social assistance robot should behave, yeah, what kind of behavior is expected. And we asked them which situations and which activities are really desired, where a social assistance robot should be able to support or serve assistance. Yeah, and we asked them openly for their personal concerns and wishes towards the social assistance robots. Basically, there were some requirements and statements that I want to highlight. Is that one critical thing is that we have to avoid threatening situations or unexpected situations, surprising behavior. That's something that really leads to a low technology acceptance in that case. And yeah, users always want to keep the control over the robot. That's key here as well. So it's desired to make the robot ask before doing something, before deciding to pause a specific activity and continue with something else, or if they postpone something, an activity. So if the robot is unsure, you always should ask. Okay, to present one scheduling approach, we have to distinguish several problems. So the first is that we have to check for parallelizability of activities. So if it's probably as well possible to do multiple activities at once. So for example, driving away, and playing some music or reading the news. It's something that does not contradict actually. So but that breaks down basically to a hardware resource conflict resolving process. But we actually have to know if that kind of conflict is hardware conflict, if it's not given and the parallelizability is possible, if it's still desirable that multiple processes, multiple activities should be performed in parallel. But the more interesting part is to see what about some incoming tasks. On one hand, the user triggered tasks, so commands that the user gives towards the robot, and where we want to know how to proceed then in case there's already some activity running. So like this entertainment stuff, so playing music. And on the second part, we have some externally triggered activities. So there's something externally coming in, and we have to decide what kind of task it is, and if we should perform an activity immediately, or should we try to prioritize user commands, or is there an incoming system triggered event that is not very time critical, or is it an emergency case like this fall detection, for example? So we have to decide on that here. I'll not go through the full flowchart process here because that's not enough time, for that. But what I want to highlight here is that for user commands, our requirements analysis said that we have to always prioritize user triggered commands before system triggered commands. So every time the user says something, the robot should react actually. So that's expected. And we distinguish between short tasks, tasks that can be performed in very, very short time. So like telling the time, for example, as well as open-end tasks like that playing music scenario. So something that could continuously being done all the way. And neither of both tasks, activities that are not short, but finite in time. And we distinguished those and decided whether to pause a running activity and resume afterwards when the short activity is finished, for example, or in what situations the system probably should ask whether the formerly executed task should be paused and halted or not, or dismissed entirely. So, and for those system triggered activities, we as well identified 5 categories where we have to categorize or prioritize different activities that are coming in. So we distinguish between emergency, high priority, medium priority, low priority activities, as well as circumstantial activities. So we have to know in advance which activities the robot, of course, could fulfill, and we have to decide whether those are emergency cases that always should lead to immediate action, so postpone everything else and dismiss running activities, up to those circumstantial tasks which are not time critical at all. For example, like just an interesting notification about some incoming news that the news flash that's might be interesting, but it's actually not time critical. And multiple different stages between where we identified that we need those further 3 distinguished categories, like this high priority category for time critical activities like incoming calls, because those incoming calls are no longer valid if we postpone, of course, if we wait until we do this activity and answer a call, for example. Medium priority activities like timers low priority activities like reminders, for example, for those medication cases. So where we have to decide, well, okay, it's time to take your medication. Then in those cases, we can of course wait some minutes in most cases. So to evaluate this procedure and the scheduling mechanism that we had here, we developed a small simulation app. It's Android-based that we presented to 5 participants of older age, and they should use it to trigger user commands as well, get triggered some externally triggered activities, and they see what the robot actually would perform in those cases, and the users and the participants should decide whether they think that the reaction of the app in this case makes any sense, or if it's a surprising behavior that they are confronted with. So we performed it as a thinking aloud test, so that when they're using the app, then they should comment directly on it, and a smaller questionnaire afterwards. And basically, the results were that they almost agreed with the procedure and it's at least feasible, but they had a concern with the number of questions that the system asks. So whether to decide whether to pause a specific activity or whether to dismiss something. Yeah. Okay. Some open questions here are. On one hand, why the evaluation showed an opposing behavior or an opposing expectation towards the scheduling mechanism. So we don't know actually why the participants complained about the number of back questions. Second is that form of customizability should be introduced here as well. So for example, a special kind of queue, for example, for user triggered commands, where we can batch process multiple commands at once. So you throw multiple requests towards the robot, and then you want the robot to do those actions sequentially. That's something that we did not include it on purpose within our scheduling mechanism, but well, probably that's something that could be desired. And lastly, it's not too straightforward to extend the scheduling mechanism. So we do not follow a specific pattern to add another category for those 5 existing categories, for example, for those system trigger tasks. So actually, we don't know then how to extend this model. This is a manual process. Yeah. So what we did is, I'm done. Yeah. So what we did is we saw that there are several expectations towards the behavior of those social assistance robots. Mostly, it's important to avoid unpredicted and surprising behavior, and to always keep the older adults in control of what the robot actually should do and actually is doing. And we did this by providing a feasible scheduling mechanism that proved to be fairly feasible, and but had some concerns, of course, here as well. And what is necessary for the future work and for the outlook is that we need to test this scheduling mechanisms with real-world social assistance robots with different kind, as well as with some smart speakers as well. So running on an Alexa would be a good option here, I think, as well. And then have to see whether that scheduling mechanism holds or has some issues still. So thank you for your attendance.
And we have a question in the crowd.
Well, thank you very much for the interesting talk. My name is Oskar Stamm from the Charité University Medicine Berlin. My question was, maybe you could underline once again, I think you had it in your beginning, why the social robots are an advantage for the use cases, because the use cases like falling could also be detected by a smartwatch, or finding a key could be detected by AirTag or something like that. So what advantage we have in social robots?
Yeah. I would say it's not a question of yeah, which is the best solution here, but what kind of interaction is preferred by the user. So probably so it's another kind of feeling to interact with an embodied system, yeah, that's driving around and you can talk to, than just have a watch that you have to control via touch, for example, or to rely on real caregivers. So a person that has to come here and help you out. So it's just another kind of interaction where you can decide what kind of system you would prefer then in those situations. So it's not the question of what is the best fall detection here, but what you would prefer to interact with.
We have 2 more questions in the crowd.
Hi, I'm Dan from University of Sheffield, Center for Assistive Technology and Connective Health. So I'm really like the robot you show here. It's really cool. I have a question is because you said that we have like simple tasks or multiple tasks, like more complicated, let's say closer to a human assistant. So I have a question related to that, because when human try to make the support to other person, so we make decisions not only by the orders the other one said, but also the experience we have. So like history data we process. So my question is, so when you design a robot, do you consider to use, for example, historical data collected from other sources or from the person itself, and to iterative with the robot? Like, for example, you said the priority thing. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask the time, and same time I want to listen to the music. So maybe different people will have the different priority. So you designed the robot to set the priority, but if there's 2 people, they have different priorities. So will you have the iteration for the robot for the design?
Mm-hmm. Well, the categories are basically made up of rather objective criteria based on the kind of task that should be fulfilled, right? So for the system trigger task, the criterion was the time critical criticalness for that specific activity that decides which category it is. So I would say that those categorization should not be too individual, so to not really based on personal preference in those cases, because that would be indeed pretty difficult to implement in a new scheduling mechanism. Yeah, but what you said as well is that those really human caregivers do interact in a different way with people, right? And I wouldn't consider a social assistance robot as a kind of replacement for a humanized caregiver. It's not a companion that you have there. So the companionship activity or the companionship perspective of social assistance robots is something that is rather declined by people. So they do not want, mostly for the most part, they do not want a social assistance robot as a replacement for a friend or something, but rather to have it as a tool. They can use it at home, that can help age at home. Yeah, and it's rather a device or a tool to increase the self-determination aspect, right? And that's why you keep full control over the over the kind of activities the social assistance robot should does. And it should not be too surprising how the robot interacts. So you say the robot what you want in that situation, and you do not want the robot to interact differently in different situations then, because that would lead to surprising behavior.
So you mean that human tend to give very clear demands to the robot. So the current user tend to or prefer to give the most clearest demands to the. Okay, I get it.
I would suggest that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have one more question.
I just have kind of a clarification question,
Mhm.
because in the beginning you said that one of the major problems in robot solutions is that they are mostly single solution or single task robotic systems, I'm gonna call them. But then you kept talking about how different tasks can be registered at the same time. I'm going to simplify it because I don't come from a background. So how does that work? Did you then design a robot that can actually do all of these things, or how does that work together?
No, I just listed some issues that you have with current systems. But when you look in the future, then you would say, okay, it would be desirable to have a social assistance robots that multi-purpose, because you don't want a robot that does just only, like a vacuum cleaning robot just doing vacuum cleaning, but you want some, which would lead to having an assistant or a robot for each activity in the household that you are doing actually. And no, what you want is probably more a robot that does multiple things at once. So a smart speaker as well on wheels if you want, but it's as well able to move around and carry your bags, for example. So do useful things for you. And that's just the thing that I keep in mind when creating this scheduling scheme.
So you're trying to kind of tackle the problem of sequentialism before it arises in the technological developments of robotics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's very futuristic.
All right.
So
Let me check
then,
online, but I think that's all the questions. Yep, no questions online.
great. Then we can move on to the last late-breaking work talk. 1 second. That's called the impact of optical flow clues and slope gradient